One of the most controversial topics among movie watchers is the idea of remaking movies and the frequency as to which Hollywood does it, seemingly more so in the past 25 years. Everyone likes to pick on Hollywood for being out of ideas, and the best way to do that is to point to all of the movies that have been remade recently and the diminishing returns in terms of quality and money made for those remakes. Now, there's outliers to this, of course, a recent example being A Star is Born, which is a movie that's been remade 3 times over the past 100 years, and pretty much every single one of those times it has been nominated for a lot of Oscars. But for every Star is Born, you have an Old Boy, a Flatliners, and a Wicker Man. But the question that I want to ask here today is, why do we remake movies? And is the mere act of remaking movies in and of itself a bad idea? Well, I'm Josh from Just MASH. Let's figure it out. To start out, I want to dispel the notion that there's too many remakes or that it's a recent thing. Since the beginning of filmmaking in the late 1800s, early 1900s, films have been remade time and time again. It's been a consistent and continued tradition in filmmaking, but even if we take a step back from the filmmaking space and just look at storytelling, this is something that's been happening since the beginning of time. When we look at fables and verbal storytelling and how they were passed down from generation to generation and details were changed or altered to kind of fit the new world that people were living in, this is something that we've always done. You can even take it a step forward and look at theater productions and Shakespearean works and how those were constantly remade and retold with different actors and altered in different ways. Even a more modern version of this is cover songs. We look at the way that people like Bob Dylan and Elvis Presley and the Beatles constantly covered songs when they were first starting out their careers. The instinct to retell the stories that have affected us along the way is something that is natural to human nature and is something that we'll always continue to do. I think with filmmaking and movies, though, there's an added layer of judgment when something gets remade or covered. When you look at music, something like that happens way more frequently, but I think the reason that people are so judgmental about it with movies is for a lot of reasons. One of those being that it's very expensive, it's very costly, it takes a lot of time to remake a movie. The other reason is a lot of times it seems like when movies get remade, it's done in bad faith, partially because the finished product never really ends up being as good as the original, but also because the movies that get remade are the most popular movies. But why would you remake something if it's not for money? Well, sometimes for an artist or a writer or a storyteller, if there's a certain type of sentimentality to a story, or if they feel like a story has a certain type of merit that could be retold or recontextualized for a new generation or a certain type of people, that maybe there is some merit to the venture of remaking that. And some of the greatest films of all time are remakes. The first few that come to mind are 12 Angry Men, The Thing, and The Fly. There's also an idea of taking a great film, but recontextualizing it for a different audience or culture. Oftentimes we see the best international films quickly get remade for American audiences to make the films a bit more accessible to people that don't quite understand the cultural context of those films. Some examples of this would be The Ring, Vanilla Sky, Insomnia, and The Departed. All of those films come from different countries and languages and were remade to varying degrees of success in America. But to me, it's something that makes sense in a lot of ways. Ultimately, the way I look at it is I think there's a lot of merit to just watching the original work, and maybe if you don't quite understand some of the contextual parts of the films because of culture, you can still appreciate it for the piece of art that it is. I think it can be easy to feel detached from works that don't necessarily reflect your experience, but I think engaging with art in those instances is actually something that you can learn a lot from. Now, this is an approach to remakes that pretty much never happens, but it probably should. But we could take bad films that have good ideas and remake those and see if we can improve upon them. Now, the reason that this doesn't happen is because movies that are either critical or commercial failures don't really get the opportunity to gain a cultural footprint pretty much outside of nostalgia. And because of that, those films don't ever get remade. Now, obviously, movies are subjective. Who's to say what a bad film is or isn't, or what a good idea is or isn't? But I do think that if we started to look at movies like that and remade those, that maybe people would be a bit more favorable to the idea. It's interesting, though, to see what exactly within the filmmaking process is what makes a film good or bad, and taking a bad movie and remaking it to see if it can be good is an interesting idea. An example of the opposite of this would be Gus Van Sant's Psycho, where he took one of the most critically acclaimed films of all time, Psycho, and did a shot-for-shot, line-for-line remake of the film. Now, this was an experiment that, in my opinion, went wrong. I don't think the film is any good, and I also don't quite understand the experiment or the idea of taking something and trying to make a carbon copy of it. If you don't have something new to say, why say anything at all? But as a filmmaking experiment to see what is essential to a film being good, I can kind of understand why you would want to do that. Different interpretations, however, are good and a great idea, but it still begs the question, are they necessary? If a film is good and it says a lot, do we need to remake it? Why can't we just go watch the original? I don't want to be someone that tries to police what art can or can't be, or if it should or shouldn't get made, or if it should or shouldn't have the ability to be good. To me, if anything is well done, or at the very least has good intentions behind it, I think it's worthy to exist. But I do agree with the argument that there are a lot of soulless corporate remakes that are churned out just to make money, and oftentimes we see this with the horror genre. Now, as somebody that wants to be a storyteller, that wants to be a filmmaker, would I ever myself do a remake of a film? As of right now, the answer is no. I cannot see a scenario where one of the works that have influenced me the most in my life that I would want to remake any of those. I think instead I would personally just recommend that you go out of your way to watch those films. But as a human being, as we grow and evolve and age, the things that appeal to us change and our sensibilities differ from how we used to feel about things. Maybe the older I become, the more nostalgic I become for things. I would want to kind of put my own spin or take on a story that I loved growing up. I think because of that, I have a sort of a softer approach or stance on filmmakers that do remake movies, because I get it at the end of the day. I get wanting to be a part of the thing that influenced you or made you feel good about yourself. Ultimately, I don't think there is a right or wrong answer when it comes to anything in filmmaking, but especially when it comes to the idea of remaking movies. Maybe we do remake too much these days, maybe not. I think really it comes down to the intention and the idea behind what you're doing. But that's just my stance on it as someone that watches movies. Obviously, any opinion on the matter is valid. Be sure to let me know in the comments below what your favorite and least favorite movie remakes are if you think that Hollywood does it too much. Please like, comment, and subscribe to the channel. It helps us out a lot. But I've been Josh from Just Smash. Until next time.